The wind dragged smoke from the far hills, and the land dry as bone, and the color of old rope stretched until it gave up to the sky. Heat rose in waves off the gravel road, blurring the edges of the fence posts that staggered toward nowhere. On that road, a woman stood still. Her dress, once blue, hung faded and wilted against her thin frame. Dust coated her hem. One boot was split near the toe. She didn't cry. Not anymore. Her eyes had dried up somewhere back near Flat Ridge, and whatever salt was left in her had been taken by the sun. In her arms, the baby twitched, restless, half asleep. The other 3 children huddled behind her skirts like shadows. They hadn't eaten since the bread crusts at dawn, and they knew better than to ask. A wagon had passed that morning, headed west. The man driving hadn't looked twice, just tipped his hat like she was another fence post. Her feet hurt. The blisters had burst days ago, and the road had taken the skin, then the blood. Now it was just pain and pressure and the quiet belief that if she stopped walking, she wouldn't get back up. But this wasn't walking anymore. This was waiting. Waiting for what she didn't know. The house she'd been heading for wasn't a house at all, just a rumor passed by a woman in town, big ranch out near Broken Spur. Lonely man lives there. No wife, no help. Might take pity on a woman who'll work. She clung to that like a prayer. The sun burned past its high mark and the baby whimpered. She shifted him on her hip bones, knocking against bones. Her mouth was so dry it ached. She wanted to lay down in the dirt and sleep until the sky came down to meet her. Then hoofbeats. Slow, steady, unhurried. A single rider. She turned her head not too fast. Pride, maybe, or just exhaustion. A man on horseback crested the rise, silhouetted against the pale sky. He was big, broad across the shoulders, with a flat-brimmed hat pulled low. His horse, a dark bay, moved easy under him like they'd been riding together a long time. He slowed when he saw her, reined in a few yards off. Dust settled between them. "You lost?" he asked. His voice was deep, rough, like wagon wheels over gravel. Not unkind. Not anything, really. She stepped forward. Not too close. Just enough for him to see the baby. "I'll work for anything," she said. "We just need a place to stop. Just for a little while." The man said nothing. His eyes moved across the children, the bundle in her arms, her cracked lips. She thought he might say no, turn and ride off. Instead, he climbed down, didn't speak, just walked to the back of his horse, untied a canteen, and held it out. She took it slow. Drank one swallow, then another. The third she held to the baby's lips. The man watched. When she handed it back, her hand brushed his. It was the smallest thing, skin against skin, but in that touch something passed between them, a quiet knowing, a recognition of what had been endured. "I got work," he said finally. "Not easy, not clean. No pay-cept food and a roof. That's more than we have." He nodded once. "Mount up. Houses a mile off." She looked at the horse, then the children. "I can walk." He didn't argue. The children followed like ghosts. As they walked behind the stranger, heat still rising around them, something in her shifted. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was something just shy of it. A flicker. A mile wasn't far, but it was farther than she'd ever thought she'd get. The house wasn't much. A single-story structure of hand-hewn boards and dry stacked stone, perched at the edge of a bluff like it was trying to keep its distance from the world. A windmill creaked slow circles behind it, drawing water from somewhere deep in the ground. A crooked porch slumped forward with age, and the front door looked like it had been punched more than once. Still it was standing. The man didn't offer a name nor ask hers. He dismounted, led the horse to the small corral beside the house, and began the quiet work of unburdening it. She waited near the edge of the porch, the children gathered around her legs silent. The baby had fallen asleep against her chest. She hadn't asked his name either. Didn't feel like she had the right just yet. Inside it smelled like dust and iron and old wood. The floors were swept but scuffed. There was a single cot in the corner, a table with one chair, a stove that looked seldom used, and a trunk nailed shut. On the far wall, 2 shelves held what looked like the only signs of softness, a folded quilt worn but bright, and a chipped mug painted with a bluebird. He cleared his throat. "You can have the cot. Kids can bed down with you if you make space." She nodded. "Thank you." He looked down at her feet. "I got salve." "Later." She followed his eyes, then looked away. "I'm all right." He didn't argue, just turned and went back out to see to the horse. The children stayed close, eyes big and round. Her eldest, a boy of maybe 10, helped his sister onto the cot, then curled beside her like a guard dog. The other girl, smaller, sat on the floor, hands in her lap, staring out the window. There was no crying. They'd been through too much for that. When night came, the man brought in a tin of beans, a hard loaf, and left them on the table without a word. She muttered a thank you and split the food 5 ways. She didn't take more than a mouthful herself. Later, she stepped out onto the porch. The air had cooled, but just barely. Stars crowded the sky in a thick river. The man was sitting on the edge of the water trough, sharpening a blade in his lap. "You from West?" he asked, eyes still on the steel. "No, Missouri." He nodded like that explained something. "You got a husband?" "No," she said. He let that sit a while. "Then dead." She shook her head. "Not any more far as I'm concerned." The rasp of the whetstone stopped. He looked up, not judging, just seeing. He nodded again. "Tomorrow you help me with the stock. Chores start at sunup. I'll be ready." He slid the knife into its sheath. "Ain't much here," he said, standing. "But you're safe, long as you pull your weight." She watched him disappear into the dark. Inside, the baby stirred. She went back in, eased onto the cot, careful not to wake the others. Her son had fallen asleep, holding her hand. As she lay there, bones sore and stomach hollow, she stared at the cracks in the ceiling. Wind whispered through the seams in the boards. The quiet wasn't comforting. It was too wide, too full of memory. But it wasn't cruel either. She hadn't felt safe in years. It didn't feel like trust. Not yet. But it was enough. If the silence spoke truth, subscribe and hear more. The rooster called before the sun rose, a ragged, lonesome sound that echoed off the bluff. She was already up, moving stiffly, her limbs unsure of themselves after so many nights on the ground. The children slept in a knot, warm against each other. She stepped outside barefoot, the dust cool under her soles, and breathed in the scent of morning dry grass, smoke from the banked fire, and something faintly sweet, like sage crushed under a boot. He was already by the barn, sleeves rolled, hat low, shoulders broad against the growing light. He didn't speak when she came up, just handed her a bucket. 2 cows. 1 goat. Pens need mucking. She nodded, took the bucket, and followed him in. The work wasn't foreign to her. She'd mucked stalls before, milked a goat once in Arkansas when the flood kept them off the road for a week. But that was years back, before the baby, before the bruises and the broken dishes, before she learned what it meant to beg without sound. Still, she moved like she remembered how. Steady, methodical. Her hands remembered the rhythm even if her muscles screamed. He watched her out of the corner of his eye, not correcting, not helping. By midday her shirt stuck to her back and her legs trembled, but she didn't stop. He showed her how to chop feed, where to stack wood, how to carry water from the well without spilling. At noon he broke for lunch, handed her a biscuit and half a jar of peaches. "Kids, eat." "They did," she said, breathless. "Thank you." He sat under the porch, Eve boots crossed, biting into the biscuit like it was an afterthought. She sat near the steps, not beside him. "Not yet." After a while he said, "You ain't the first come looking for work." She glanced at him. "Most leave." She swallowed. "I'm not most." He looked at her, his face unreadable, jaw shadowed with dust and stubble. "No, I don't reckon you are." In the evenings after the chores and supper she began sweeping the house. Not for him, for herself. To claim something. She scrubbed the walls with a rag and well water, found the quilt, and draped it over the cot, mended a shirt of his with a needle she found in the bottom of the trunk. The children began to laugh again, soft, surprised sounds like birds learning they could still sing. She noticed the way he never raised his voice. Not once. Even when the youngest knocked over a feed sack or let the goat into the barn. He'd just sigh, run a hand through his hair, and fix whatever needed fixing. One night a storm rolled in. Lightning cracked the sky like glass, and rain came down in sheets. The wind pushed through the gaps in the walls, howling. The girl, the second-born, woke screaming, clutching at her mother. She wrapped her arms around the child and rocked her slow, but her own hands shook. When the door opened, she flinched. He stood there holding the lantern, his shirt-damp hair dripping from the walk-in. "You all right?" he asked. The little girl whimpered, clinging tighter. "Just the storm," she said. "It spooks her." He hesitated, then stepped inside. Sat near the cot, not touching, just a steady shape in the dark. The light flickered across his face. "I used to think the wind was angry," he said softly, "like it wanted to tear the roof off and take you with it. But my ma, she told me it was just talk and said it only hollered when no one listened." The little girl blinked at him wide-eyed. "What's it saying now?" she whispered. He smiled, slow and dry. "Sounds to me like it's just tired." The child burrowed back into her mother's side. Slowly her breathing eased. He stood again, nodded once, and left the room. She looked down at her daughter, then at the doorway he'd gone through. The wind kept talking. But for the first time in a long while she wasn't afraid to listen. By the second week she knew how to handle the horse without being told, could spot a loose board in the fence before it splintered, and carried a pail on each hip without sloshing a drop. Her hands toughened. The blisters split, bled, healed. Her shoulders stopped aching at sundown and started again at dawn, but it was a pain that felt earned. Clean pain. The man, his name she learned by accident was Elias, had a way of moving through the world like he expected nothing and noticed everything. He was quiet but not cold. Kind but not soft. The kind of man who fixed a thing before it broke, who didn't talk about himself unless pressed. She didn't press. But sometimes she'd catch him watching her from the edge of the field, his hat low, eyes shadowed. Not staring. Just seeing. One morning she found an old dress folded on the porch rail. Stitched by hand. Faded but strong. No note. No explanation. But it fit. Later that day he said was my mother's. She nodded, unsure what to say. She wore it working, he added. Figured you could too. When the days stretched long and the land turned from gold to gray, he brought her to the north pasture. A calf had gone missing and he needed the help. She followed him through brush and thistle, sweat pooling at the base of her neck. "You always alone out here?" she asked when the silence got too heavy. He didn't look back. "Mostly." She waited. "My brother was here before. Got tired of it. Took off for California 2 winters ago. Said he wanted to be where things were moving. And you didn't too." His shoulders lifted in a shrug. "I like things still." They found the calf at the edge of a dry ravine, tangled in old wire. Alive but shaken. She helped hold it while he cut it loose, his knife quick and sure. When it was done and the calf limped away, he looked at her. "You're good with animals." "I had to be," she said. "Sometimes they were the only ones that didn't hit back." He didn't speak, just offered his canteen. She drank, handed it back. For a moment their fingers touched. "Why'd you leave?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "Because staying felt like drowning, and leaving felt like bleeding. I figured bleeding at least meant I was still alive." He didn't flinch, just nodded once, like he understood more than she said. By the time September came, the mornings held a bite. The air smelled of smoke and frost. She'd started waking before the rooster, tying her hair back with a strip of cloth, stepping into boots before the light touched the hills. One morning, Elias found her mending a fence rail by herself. He leaned against the post. "You've fixed things that aren't even broke yet," he said. She looked up. "If I wait, they'll fall apart." He tilted his head like he could see straight through her. "That how you lived back then, always fixing?" She drove the nail in sharp. "Didn't matter. Some things break anyway." They stood in silence for a beat. Wind moved through the dry grass. "You're not a servant here," he said quietly. "You don't have to prove your worth every hour." She stared at the rail, her throat tight. "I'm not trying to prove anything," she said. "I'm trying not to disappear." His eyes softened. He took one step closer, then stopped himself. "You haven't." It was the kindest thing anyone had said in years. She didn't cry, but something in her chest cracked open. A space wide enough to hold a little bit of trust. The trust grew like winter wheat, slow, quiet, mostly underground. It showed itself in small things, the way he left coffee warming for her in the mornings, though he never drank it himself. The way she started setting out 2 plates without thinking. The way the children stopped flinching when a boot scuffed the floor too loud. Some nights after the chores and supper and the soft murmur of children's sleep, they'd sit on the porch, not close, not touching, just the same bench, the same night air. He'd smoke a hand-rolled cigarette, watching the stars like he expected an answer. She'd keep her hands busy with thread or quiet stillness. "You miss your family?" she asked once when the moon was high and he hadn't spoken in an hour. He flicked ash into the dark. "Sometimes," he said. "Not all of them. Just my ma." She waited. "She died out here. Fever got her. Year after the war ended." "I'm sorry." She was the only one who stayed. The rest scattered like seeds in a dry field. Her voice was soft. "It's hard being the one who stays." He glanced sideways at her. "It's harder being the one left behind." They didn't talk after that, but the silence had changed. She built a rhythm into the days. Taught the children how to feed the goats, gather eggs, sweep the floor without stirring too much dust. She cleaned out the small shed behind the barn, turned it into a space for them to sleep so the cot was no longer so crowded. It smelled of hay and old leather, but the roof held. Elias never said much, but he started waiting for her before going out to the pasture. And he began showing her things he hadn't before: how to read the clouds for weather, how to mend harness leather, how to shoot. "I don't want to shoot," she'd said the first time, staring down the long iron barrel of the rifle. He only said, "Don't matter if you want to. You need to." The weight of the rifle steadied in her arms. Her first shot missed the post by 5 feet. Her second hit dead wood. She didn't smile, but he did. "Good," he said. Again. In the 3rd month, a man came riding down the ridge. She saw the dust trail first, then the glint of his belt buckle in the sun. Elias came out of the barn and stood beside her, watching. The man rode up slow, hat cocked, smile wide. "Well, hell," he drawled, swinging down from his saddle. "Didn't think I'd find you still breathing, cousin." Elias's jaw worked once. "Clayton." Clayton tipped his hat toward her. "You're prettier than I expected. Bit skinny, though." Elias always did take in strays. Her hand dropped instinctively to the baby's back. "State your business," Elias said. Clayton laughed. "You never change. You get my letter. I burned it. Then I'll keep it short. I need the deed, Eli. We both know you're sitting on more land than you can manage. I'll take half. Hell, I'll even pay for it." "No." Clayton's smile tightened. "You always were the dumb one." Elias stepped forward. "Just one step. You ride off this property now. Don't come back." The two men locked eyes. Something old and deep passed between them. Not hate. Not quite. Clayton spit in the dust. "You let me know when she gets tired of you," he said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Be ashamed to waste a woman like that on a place like this." He rode off. Elias didn't move. She didn't ask questions. Just waited. That night he drank for the first time since she'd known him. Sat on the porch with a bottle and the sky and nothing else. She came out after putting the children to bed. "Family?" she asked. "Unfortunately." He offered the bottle. She shook her head. "He want the land." He nodded. She sat beside him close enough this time for their arms to brush. "You gonna give it to him?" "No." She looked at him. "Why not?" He stared out at the dark. "Because I built this. Because it's mine. Because I don't want to be the kind of man who gives up." She was quiet. Then softly, "Me neither." He turned toward her. His eyes were tired, but something flickered in them. Something that looked like resolve. Or maybe faith. She didn't look away. The next morning he was up early again like nothing had happened. Like there hadn't been whiskey on his breath or anger in his eyes the night before. He moved through the barn with quiet purpose, hammering a loose hinge back in place, checking the salt blocks, tightening the saddle cinch twice, just to be sure. She didn't ask about Clayton. But that night after the children were asleep, she found the deed in a tin box under the floorboard near the stove. Folded, careful. Crisp, as if it had been touched only rarely. Her name wasn't on it, but that didn't matter. It was the first time she realized how close he kept the things he meant to protect. The weather turned colder. Frost crept along the windows at dawn and breath showed in the air by supper time. She mended a pair of mittens from an old coat and lined the shed with more hay. The children gathered near the stove after chores, drawing shapes in the fogged windows. One afternoon, Elias rode out to the far fence line. She stayed behind to fix the stovepipe that had started leaking smoke again. He came back quiet, jaw tight. "What is it?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. He didn't answer, just handed her something wrapped in cloth. Inside was a dead chicken. Neck snapped, body still warm. "Coyote." "Knife," he said. She looked up sharply. "Clayton." He nodded once. It wasn't just about land anymore. For the next few days, Elias kept the rifle within reach. He didn't tell her to be afraid. He didn't have to. Fear had a smell, dry sweat, cold breath, the way silence pressed against the ribs. He started sleeping near the door. The children felt it too. Her oldest stopped laughing again. The girls watched the window like they expected the devil himself to come through it. "I don't want to run again," she whispered late one night. "You won't?" he said. His voice was so certain, so quiet, it almost broke her. The confrontation came at dusk. She saw the dust first, same as before. But this time there were two riders. Clayton and another man, bigger, meaner looking. Not family. Elias didn't wait. He stepped out onto the porch with the rifle slung low and his coat open. "You were warned," he said. Clayton grinned. "I was. I just never listened good." She came out behind Elias. Didn't speak. Didn't move to stop him. The children watched from the window. Clayton dismounted slow and casual, like this was a visit, not a threat. "Don't want to hurt nobody," he said. "Just want what's mine." "It's not yours," Elias said. "You never even wanted it," Clayton snapped. "You just held on because you didn't know what else to do." "That may be true," Elias said. "But I know now." Clayton's grin faded. "You'd fight your own blood over this woman." Elias's voice stayed calm. "I'd fight over this land, over what's mine, over what I've built, and I'd fight to keep her safe." She didn't breathe. Clayton's friend shifted in his saddle. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked, hand drifting toward his belt. Elias didn't blink. "You?" The standoff held for a long beat, long enough for the wind to carry the smell of firewood, for the stars to blink into the sky one by one. Then Clayton spit and turned. "Not worth it," he muttered. "Let him rot with his goats and his orphans." They rode off. Elias stood still until the dust settled. She reached out, touched his arm. He didn't look at her, just said they won't be back. And she believed him, because he didn't speak unless he meant it. The cold settled in for good after that, the kind that cracked your hands and turned the sky a hard, unforgiving blue. Snow came early, light at first, then heavier. By November the land had gone still beneath a thick white hush. The animals huddled close to the barn walls. The days shortened and the nights wrapped themselves tight around the little house. Inside it was warmer than it had any right to be. The children laughed again. Real laughter from the belly. Her boy carved small animals from scrap wood, showed them to Elias with shy pride. The girls played with dried corn husks and made up songs about goats. The baby had taken to sleeping through the night, one tiny fist curled in her mother's hair. She cooked now real meals when she could, made from root vegetables, flour, what little they had. Elias always ate without complaint, even when the biscuits turned hard or the beans were thin. Sometimes she caught him watching her from across the table, not in the way men used to, but like he couldn't quite believe she was still there. She knew the feeling. One night, deep in December, she found him outside splitting wood long after dark. The sky was sharp with stars. His breath showed white in the air. "You'll lose a hand working that late," she said, stepping off the porch. He paused, axe in hand, but didn't look over. "Can't sleep." She waited. "I used to think I'd die out here. Not in some dramatic way, just slow. Forgotten." Her voice was quiet. "Is that what you want?" He lowered the axe. Finally turned. "No." There was nothing between them but snow and breath and the weight of things unsaid. She took a step closer. "I used to think love was a thing you begged for," she said. "A kindness you had to earn with silence, with bruises, with pretending." His eyes flicked to hers, softened. "I don't want to pretend anymore." He dropped the axe, walked to her, stopped just close enough for her to feel the heat of him. "I'm not good with words," he said. "I don't need words." Still, he tried. "I ain't offering a rescue. Just a place. A life. With you if you want it." She stepped forward, closed the space between them, rested her hand on his chest. His heart beat steady beneath it. "I want it," she said. It wasn't a kiss, not at first. Just a meeting of foreheads, of breath, of quiet. But it was more than enough. The snow came heavier after that, and they settled into something close to peace. The shed became a bedroom, better sealed and warmer. Elias built bunks for the children. She painted the window frames blue like the mug on his shelf. They never spoke of marriage, not at first. But one morning come spring, he slid a simple silver ring onto the table beside her coffee. "You can say no," he said. She smiled, picked it up, slipped it on. "I won't." The land greened again. The trees budded, the goats birthed 2 kids, and the world felt possible. They planted potatoes and onions in a long row of corn. She taught the girls how to sew. Elias taught her son to ride. The baby learned to walk, toddling after chickens, arms out wide. One evening she found Elias sitting in the field with the boy carving another animal. "What is it?" she asked. Elias held it up. It was a bird wings spread, ready to fly. "For you," he said. She took it in her palm. The wood was warm from his hands. "You think birds know where they're going?" she asked. "Don't think it matters," he said. "They go anyway." She looked out over the fields, the hills, the house built with weathered hands and quiet hope. This time she knew where she was going, and she wasn't going alone. The land remembers. Subscribe and learn why.